Welcome to Popcorn Psychology, the podcast where we watch blockbuster movies and psychoanalyze them. My name is Brittany Brownfield, and I'm a child therapist, and I'm joined by...
Ben Stover, individual therapist.
Hannah Espinoza, marriage and family therapist.
We are all licensed clinical professional counselors, also known as therapists, who practice out of Chicago. Even though we are licensed mental health professionals, this podcast is purely for entertainment purposes and to fulfill our love of dissecting pop culture in all forms.
Please remember that even though we are all licensed therapists, we aren't your therapist.
If you are struggling with mental health symptoms, please find a local mental health provider.
And today is our first holiday episode. We're going to be talking about While You Were Sleeping. It's a classic Sandra Bullock 90s rom-com classic that's set during Christmas and also set in Chicago, where we are. So we definitely came to our attention when we were thinking about what holiday movies we wanted to do this year. So in this episode, we'll be talking about interpersonal skills. We'll be talking about attachment and family systems. And we'll also be talking about grief and the holidays. So we're going to try to keep it as light as possible. But knowing us, maybe not so much.
I think this is the first one in a while where the word trauma may not exit my lips.
Except for right now.
Except for right now. And the fact that she almost died with a train.
So you... Oh, yeah.
So, to give a general recap of this movie, which you should definitely... I know people don't always watch movies when they see it, but this is a nice, fuzzy, warm one to watch. And it's Sandra Bullock plays a character named Lucy, who is a CTA worker back when they used to take coins when you had to ride the train. And she has a whole daydream about this guy that rides the train every day. He falls into the tracks. She goes and saves him when she goes to visit him in the hospital. It's a classic 90s rom-com mix-up where his family is led to believe that she's engaged to him even though they have no relationship. And then over the course of the movie, she gets more and more involved with his family without really telling them that she does not know their family member at all, Peter, the guy who fell on the tracks. And then she slowly falls in love with his brother, Jack, shenanigans and all that. And then, it just keeps going on and on from there until everyone finds out that she actually has no affiliation with their son, who is in a coma for the duration of this, which I did not say.
Which is why the movie is called While You Were Sleeping.
Yes. So we'll be spending the majority of this movie talking about Lucy, so Sandra Bullock's character. One important part about her is that she is a single woman living by herself. Her mother died when she was very young, I think 2, and her father passed away the year before. So she's very isolated going into this movie. And like we said, seems to spend most of her time just by herself, just in her own little world, daydreaming about this guy, Peter, who she becomes embroiled with.
I think that's a really good synopsis of this.
Thank you.
It's very, very concise and covers the main details.
So good.
This is a classic of mine, and I think Hannah's as well. So It's right at the tip of my brain.
Yes, I'm going to just go ahead and put out there immediately that I feel hoodwinked into watching this movie.
You were given a gift.
Yeah, you're welcome.
A Christmas gift, if you will.
The only gift that I was given is that I got to, while watching this movie, think about, Batman stood there, Batman stood there, Batman stood there.
For anyone who doesn't know, and there's a lot of people who shouldn't, the newer Batman movies, the Christopher Nolan ones, were also shot in Chicago.
First 2.
So that's where Ben pulls all of his references, is even though he's lived here his whole life, he still pulls it all from that reference point.
Yep. So thanks so much.
This Gotham and the new one were both here.
Thanks for the clarification.
And with that, we will be segueing back into this movie.
Yes.
Except for the third movie, which was in Pittsburgh.
The first topic we want to talk about today is, interpersonal skills. In particular, how they're represented in this movie, like I said, the character of Lucy, and how, isolated she is and lonely she is, and how passive she is as well. Because I think right off the bat, like I said, we see that she is someone who, I don't know, does she have friends?
Yes.
Yes, she has...
At least work friends.
Work friends.
She's work friends.
But they don't seem to know her all that well.
Yeah, her one friend at work doesn't seem to be Cecilia, I think, is her name.
Celeste.
Oh, there we go. She doesn't seem to be... she's surprised when she thinks that Lucy's engaged. But she also doesn't seem, hurt. I can't believe, I didn't even know you were dating somebody. You know what I mean? Like, she doesn't have the response I would think of someone who was really close to her.
No, she doesn't. It's pretty clear that she lives a rather isolated and introverted life.
Like, right away,
Absolutely.
she's trying to move that Christmas tree into her apartment, and she's doing that all by herself. Like, there's no one that's helping her, like, lift that in. She's trying to lift it up by a cord all by herself through a window, which obviously doesn't work out.
Not great.
Yeah, it seems like her only points of connection are almost like relationships by convenience. And by that, I mean like her landlord who lives like, seems like right below her, his son who she doesn't really have like necessarily a positive relationship with, and the people who work close to her.
Mostly her boss, which,
yeah,
interestingly enough, talking about attachment, all of her meaningful relationships are with older men who are father figures of some shape in her life because she lost her dad, which we find out nearly immediately in her monologue to open the story. So it would not be abnormal at all for someone who was raised primarily by their father to seek out relationships with fatherly figures to fill some of the void left behind by dad's passing.
Especially since it seems like that's her closest relationship.
Yeah, and I was going to say because she's very familiar with that. She's very familiar with having that kind of relationship. So it's also something that you'd be more likely to seek out at the same time.
Yeah,
and just like feel comfortable, feeling comfortable with having a relationship like that. More comfortable than having a relationship with a woman since she lost her mother.
Right. And she would feel probably pretty lost without those people in her life. And you notice like she globs onto the Godfather and to her boss and somewhat to the landlord, looking for guidance in every opportunity to do so because that's the way she had done it her whole life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's never like calling a girlfriend or having someone over. Like she goes to the work holiday party sort of, and that's really the only social interaction we see that's on her terms.
Right, that's it. Everything else is her in other people's situations trying to avoid making other people uncomfortable and taking other people's needs and placing them far above her own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like and we see her kind of be mildly like taken advantage of. Like the movie opens up with her boss, who she has a warm relationship with, like telling her, not even really asking her, telling her, hey, since you have no family and basically no social life, we need you to work Christmas and Thanksgiving. Yeah,
that was some straight up bullshit. He was manipulating her like, look, I recommended you for Employee of the Month, but you have to work on the holidays.
I mean, and I think that's something to be said. You know, I'm a single adult woman myself, and I think there can be a bit more onus on those like people in this population to like bear the brunt of more things because you don't have, you know, kids to go home to or, you know, things like that. It can be considered like. And I've seen people, like I've read articles of people talking about this, of more just like, you have more flexibility, which isn't objectively true. And, you know, also can put you at a place of maybe more burnout or things like that because there's an expectation that your time is freer and that you should have less boundaries about your time. And I think something we noticed right away with Lucy as well is that she's a pretty... as well as being pretty isolated and lonely, she's a pretty passive person.
She's definitely a passive person. She's fairly introverted and used to being mostly solitary.
Yes.
So it's going to be very easy for her to be swept up by boisterous people and want to, you know, accommodate the needs of other folks. Mm-hmm. And place that above herself, especially given that it was just her and her dad.
Yes, because I think one thing I definitely noticed watching this movie as an adult is I fully expected watching this movie as a therapist that I would be like, oh my gosh, Lucy, Sandra Bullock's character, is taking advantage of this family that thinks that she's engaged to their son. And really what I noticed is many times she tries to assert herself, like she tries to tell the truth, and she gets immediately like railroaded or just talked over, and she doesn't really know how to like push through that.
No, because she's never had to. And you can see this happen with people that were in family systems where either they had no power in the system or where they come from a small base unit like she does, and it's not hard to get your needs met and to communicate with the person because you have one or two other people to deal with. Whereas in a large, boisterous family like this, you have to be loud or your needs don't get met. You have to stand out, and you have to go through periods of time where you acquire the skill to cut through that noise.
So she's a lot more well-meaning than I thought when I going in to watch this movie again. And like you're saying, like she just doesn't know how to like throw her weight around. No,
she doesn't. She would never had to acquire that skill, except with like other kids and stuff on the playgrounds. But we don't know what kind of schooling she had or what kind of interaction. Maybe she was in small classes. You don't know.
Well, and I feel like, and also knowing that she went to college for a year and then came back because her dad got sick. So she also had that time where kind of young adults really have a chance to go out on their own in some ways. She wasn't able to do that like other people were able to do that. So also knowing that also brought her back to this position of being with her dad mainly to help take care of him. So that also really decreased her, just the interpersonal skills that you have to have in order to be heard in a lot of different ways. I mean, I think about, it sounds like her and her dad probably got along pretty well. Like, we don't know a lot, but she's not telling stories about fights. Like, she's telling stories about kind and how much she loved her dad. So I feel like it also was probably something where she agreed with what he was saying, or she went along with what he was saying a lot of the time because it felt really comfortable because she really trusted him. So I also feel like in that case, when you don't have awareness of, well, you just don't have practice. It's not awareness. You just don't have enough practice with having to be assertive, with having to push back against people, and learning how to do that is a skill in different ways. And it's something that I know that I work with, I would say, in a lot of ways with women more often than not, to be assertive, but also it can be any gender.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And especially you find it where the person has come from a family where someone else is a more dominant personality or has more needs, where they have been used to being a caregiver as opposed to a equal unit in the system. And I see that a lot, and I do see that a lot with women. I feel like there's a lot of session time spent working on convincing people to be okay, advocating for their needs in a completely reasonable way, and recognizing where the dysfunctional thoughts may be that are so deeply implanted in that asking for my needs is wrong and takes away from other people.
Absolutely.
I think same, in which, and usually, like I said, women I'm having this conversation with, which is you are allowed to take up space.
Yep.
And you don't need a reason to take up space. I think sometimes when I work with people, they'll almost be, this is a little bit of a sidebar, but they'll almost be apprehensive about quote unquote getting better, because when they are more ill mentally, they feel like they have like a quote unquote excuse to ask for more, to need more. And so there can be fear that if I allow myself to get better, then I am also losing the ability to like take up space and get my needs met. And so it can be like, you don't need to have a reason to take up space other than I'm a whole human being who deserves as much space as anybody else. And it can be such an uncomfortable feeling. And I think you brought up a good point, Hannah, a little bit before, which is that she's someone who in the movie, she talks a lot about how I want to travel. I have had a passport, even though I've never gone anywhere. And she finally tries to go out on her own. And then she has to go back home, take care of her dad. And so she never really got a chance to like form her own identity. And like that thing where you have to, like the milestone of going away and being independent and making space and meeting new people and asserting who you are and making that. And then you go home and then it just becomes, I mean, being a caregiver is so isolating. Like you are just with that person in their home for as long as you're taking care of them. And that in itself, so she's coming from also probably only a year out of a very isolating experience.
Yes, and that role also takes away the focus on yourself, because every waking moment becomes about that person who is ill, and people start staving off their needs so that they can do this, and I just have to do this for a little while this person is sick, and like, I need to take care of them, and they spend no time taking care of themselves and end up with caregiver fatigue.
Mm-hmm. Which I think we talked about at length in the Logan episode.
Yes.
We talked about that in great detail in the Logan episode, which is one of several people's favorites, and it hasn't gotten quite the traction that maybe it is warranted to get. So if you guys haven't checked out our episode on Logan, please take a second to do that when you get done with this one. And also, while we're on the topic, if you could, please take a second to like and share our podcast and leave us a review on iTunes if you would. Those reviews and likes and shares go so much farther than anyone can ever imagine, and it helps other people find us. And if you guys can help us do that, we would really appreciate you, because we'd like to get into more houses and more ears and cause more
calamity
change in the world. And yes, and
we're gonna open up all the doors.
We're gonna open up all the doors and solve all of the stigma in the world.
Yes.
That's our goal.
Oh my God, that would make me so fucking happy.
And I would also say, thinking more about, we don't know a lot about her. We know like the bare bones of her backstory.
Yeah.
But we don't really know what she was like before her dad died. So maybe, because I think one thing to note is that her personality, once she kind of gets into this mode with Peter's family, like, she's very likable and friendly and sometimes vivacious, and it makes me wonder if this is her like blossoming into herself because she's being fulfilled, relationally, or was there a version of her there before her dad died that got squashed with her grief?
I think it got squashed with not just the grief, but the pre-grief of caregiving.
Oh, for sure.
Absolutely.
And I also wonder how long she cared for him, because my guess is she's in her mid to late 20s. And if she started taking care of him when she was a sophomore in college, like, that's a big chunk of time.
That's a long time.
I feel like he was sick for more than 2 years. I feel like it was more like 3 or 4 years, and she took care of him the whole time. And she had to get a job with the CTA in order to, because she couldn't go to school, so she had to get a job with the CTA in order to manage while she helped take care of him. So how isolating that even that job is in and of itself. Like, you see a lot of people, but you don't necessarily interact with a lot of people. And how
so
you're ignored.
Yeah. And also that when we lose the person who, which we've talked about identity, we talk about identity a lot when we talk about grief. But when you lose the person who helps you know who you are and what your place is in the world, that also messes with our identity and our sense of self. So it would also make a lot of sense that she would be struggling with that, just based on the fact that she lost the person that she knew the best, the person that loved her the most. So also that sense of that loss, along with having to take care of him, and that taking care of someone, taking care of a parent or a grandparent or a spouse or a child, and watching what happens to them and to their bodies and how they can shift and change is maybe one of the hardest things to do as a human, is to watch people that we love not be themselves anymore.
Yeah, and I'm sure she wasn't talking to anybody about it when it was happening.
Nope, likely not.
Ugh. And like, yeah, you were saying, like, her job is so, she's in a literal like cube for her job. She has the person she shares her cube with, which she does seem to have a positive relationship, Celeste.
Yeah.
But other than that, she's just, and it's so mundane. You know, and she seems like she's got a lot going on internally, and so she's probably really smart, and then also doing a job that's so unfulfilling and so boring. You know, how can you not let your mind wander the way that she lets her mind wander?
I think it's completely normal, and also like to think about how dehumanizing working in a booth behind glass and the only thing anybody is doing when they're getting on the L. I don't know why you guys keep calling it the train. What's going on with you guys?
Brittany keeps telling me it's a train.
L,
not
Brittany. Like, Hannah's like, I have adopted Chicago now, and I use the proper terminology.
Yes.
Wow. Congratulations.
And, well, just like a reminder that we have the best pizza. And
That is also true.
the word L is we take the L around. But anyway, the train is the thing that takes you to the suburbs. The L is what takes you around the city.
Oh. No one's corrected me yet. Well, until now.
I'm just
and I know
helping
I said
you understand.
And I know I said CTA earlier, which is the L. Because I was saying she works for the CTA. So people might not know what that means.
That's true. People might not know.
And so basically when
Chicago
people...
Transit Authority.
Yeah, so when people go on the train, she sits in that cubicle where they put their coins. Wouldn't that be cute? I was like longing for a time when you had to carry around little coins with you. Go on to the L.
We should get you a little pirate pouch that you carry around.
With my little doubloons, my little train doubloons.
Right. I could see you, we just like get the Ren Fair version of Brittany carrying around like a little like leather pouch tied to your vest or tied to your belt.
Absolutely.
So yes,
or a vest. I can see you as a vest person.
And so she a vest person.
I can totally see you as a vest person.
It does. It kind of does.
Not the way my brother is a vest person, but
yikes.
I don't know about that.
Yeah,
I don't know about that
exactly.
Yeah, and so like I'm sure there's a big part of her right now over the past year that's just floundering. Like, who am I? Like you're saying, Hannah. Now that am I still a daughter? And that was probably the biggest identifier for her, is being a daughter her whole life. And she's not, who am I if I'm not a daughter? I'm not in school. I don't have a reason to not be in school anymore. I don't really have a reason to not travel anymore. So I'm sure she's like the definition of going through the motions. Like just day in and day out. Just trying to make it work.
And I think when someone is in that state, like you said, what I feel like it is that also when what you've been doing for the last several years is completely removed from your life, that would also be an impact on your identity. Mm-hmm. So also before when we see her in her apartment by herself, which we so often do in the movie, that might have been time that she normally would have been spending with her dad. So that might also be why she hasn't filled it, which would again, it makes sense why she's so isolated, why she feels so isolated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also, and I think what happens to people, unfortunately, is that throughout this movie, you also see her agency being taken from her. So it becomes a perpetuating cycle where yeah, like I'd start to identify as I don't have any agency, and then people take it from you, and so then it just continues. Like the Joe Jr. stuff. Like, he's constantly asserting who he is to her, and she's sort of taking it, sort of not. Like, so many people in this movie are telling her who she is, or telling her what she should be doing. And even when she tries to assert herself, she just gets railroaded really quickly, and like we were saying before, it doesn't know how to come back from that.
No, she doesn't. But you know what I just did? As you were talking about that, and I was like playing through the scenes that you're talking about where she's getting railroaded by the other family all the time.
Yeah.
I realized I said I wasn't going to say the T word, didn't I?
T word.
You sure the fuck did.
I did. And you know what I was? I was wrong.
You're fucking right. You were wrong.
Here we go.
I knew you were wrong.
Put this on
but
your
I wanted
bingo.
to wait until we got to this moment where I could say, you were wrong about that, Ben. Go ahead, Brittany.
Everybody, put on your bingo card. Look at your bingo card. And if you got the trauma square, Ben's about to fill it for you.
Well, we got Batman so far.
Yep.
We haven't had Robot Scary yet, but I'm waiting for that one. Anyway, the thing that I haven't factored in my head until you were saying this as I'm playing it back in my head is going like, why does she not stand up for herself? What is the driving force behind that? Why does she not assert herself in the family system and just tell them the truth? Mm-hmm. Why?
Because she's traumatized. Is that the answer?
I mean, sort of. I mean, like saying she has the loss of a family member is inherently traumatic. So yes, and then watching them die slowly is traumatic. Not saying she has PTSD because I don't think she does.
No.
But why? She's very compassionate. Like she's an empath.
Well, think about like the one time in this movie where she is has so much agency, is when she saves Peter's life in the beginning, and that's because it's a caretaker situation.
Correct. But what is the primary reason she does not just tell the family that the nurse was mistaken?
Because of the grandma.
Because of the grandma. What's wrong with the grandma?
The grandma has a heart condition, and it's serious, or it's led her to believe that it's serious, and so she doesn't want anything to happen to grandma.
And she's been told repeatedly in this movie that if you tell grandma the truth, she'll literally like drop dead.
Yeah, like her boss told her a horrible story about how his mother-in-law, when she found out he was marrying his wife, her appendix burst. That's the story that he told her when she came to him and was like,
you can't make someone's
I know, it doesn't make any sense, but
this is not a thing.
But he tells her that story, which again is unhelpful.
Which, here's the thing, her most disturbing experience in her whole life is watching her father die of what we're assuming is cancer.
Yeah.
And the thing that she is struggling with as she's going through these holidays, which are either the first or the second holidays she has been through without the presence of her father, is that she inherently knows the biggest pain in her life is a loved one dying and not being there around this time of year. So her empathy and compassion for this family is driving her to keep herself in an uncomfortable situation. There's not a malicious bone in this woman's body. There's a little tad of selfishness that appears right before the wedding, but that is not the driving force in her. That is her trying to talk herself into it. The driving force in her is not a conniving ass woman like the other fiance. Is to protect this family from the same degree of pain that she felt by not making grandma die.
And that's a good point too. Like with the only time she
1,000 points to Hufflepuff.
Yeah, because like you're right. The only time she truly tries to be selfish in this movie, which is following through with the wedding, and you can tell that she's not comfortable because she's like yelling at her boss about it, and that's not her personality. Like she's like, "I'm doing it," kind of energy, and then she immediately balks as soon as the ceremony starts. She's like, "Ah!" and she like pulls out.
Ooh, that is a great baseball term, Brittany.
What?
Balk.
Bulk?
Yep.
That's what that's from?
Yep.
I did not know.
It is when you step off the rubber like you're going to pitch, and then
you fake pitch.
You fake pitch.
Oh.
But it's a penalty, yeah.
Yeah, it's bad.
Okay.
Well, and I feel like the other part of when she's having that discussion with her boss, Jerry, the other part of that I think is interesting is that she also feels like she gave Jack a chance to say something to her.
And she did not.
But she did not give him a chance because she didn't actually tell him how she felt, because she probably hasn't had a lot of practice in terms of a romantic situation, possibly, based on what it appears to be. Like, we don't have any fucking evidence that this is actually true. All I'm saying is that it seems like she doesn't know how to communicate that with him clearly. So saying to someone, is there any reason why you think I shouldn't get married? Like, how would someone interpret that? Like, there's so many different ways to interpret that. She didn't really give Jack a chance, and she feels let down, even though she hasn't given him the opportunity.
It's such a high school way or even middle school way to ask if someone likes you.
Yeah.
Or to think you make a proclamation.
Right.
It's such a, like you're saying, like such a passive nothing thing to say. Like, how would he know where she's going with that, really?
Yeah, like he might be like, oh, like you don't want to be with somebody who has a brain injury. Like who knows what he's thinking?
Right. And especially with him, he's like going at such a consistent rate of making, that didn't make any sense. I'm going to back up and like make the thoughts coming out of my mouth make sense.
I love it.
That happens sometimes. You ever get lost in your thought, going like, I know what the fuck I'm trying to say and I cannot get there, so I'm going to keep talking until I do. As that happens.
Yeah. All the time to me.
Yep. I think this happens to all therapists, and clients just keep looking at us and they go, are they intending to do this on purpose? And we get really good at it, so it looks like we might be, but secret's out.
I actually said that to a client today in session. I said, wait a minute, let me start over.
Right. I got lost.
I was like, oh, nope, I was going somewhere and I lost it.
I got lost. But anywho, like what I think we see is that now it's gone. Nope.
Jack.
Yes, Jack's very adamantly adhering to making sure she has free will, and he is not interfering with her at all, and that he is not influencing her decisions inappropriately. He is keeping his own needs and wants.
You love to see it.
You really
I mean, you don't see it enough. You see enough, especially in rom-coms where the turn comes when the guy finally does the thing, the big bold thing where he stands up at the wedding and says, "Don't marry her," and people fantasize about that being real when everyone else is going no,
Yeah.
$30,000.
That's a good point, though, because in another movie, when he showed up at her apartment the day before the wedding, he would have been like, don't get married, Pete. Marry me. Or I'm in love with you. In another movie,
Choose
he would have
me,
made a
marry
proclamation.
Me. Yeah,
right,
exactly.
And he did none of that. He made sure to stay on the good guy. And Brittany's like...
That's a good point.
He's such a good piece.
I didn't think about that.
Yes.
Brittany's going... We had a conversation off mic about how Brittany's ideal man is basically Bill Pullman in this movie. So...
I mean, yeah.
I mean, duh.
I mean, I live here. Where is he?
Yeah, exactly. in his ripped ass jeans.
Don't walk around, I guess, looking for estate sales.
No, he's making his tables.
Furniture.
He's being Ron Swanson.
Oh my God.
I thought the same thing, making his rocking chairs.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's very cute.
Yeah, but I think that's a really good point, is that she's just so, like you were saying, she went away to college, was probably still trying to assert herself and figure out who she is, within social systems, and then got yanked from that. I don't know how she would date while also being a caregiver for her dad. She probably didn't, and maybe even use it as an excuse to not be vulnerable romantically.
Probably.
And so now doesn't have that excuse. And so you kind of see her mature romantically throughout the movie and her interactions with Jack.
I don't know if I like excuse exactly. I feel like it's more of being in a position where there's a difference between how uncomfortable you are. Yeah. And that she's not comfortable in doing that. And also doesn't have someone maybe to talk to about how you go about it. I mean, she grew up with
no female peers. Yeah.
Yeah, she doesn't have any female peers. And her dad, it appears, wasn't in another relationship. So just not having that part. And not that means that she can't have that part, but just that I think at this point... she doesn't have that. But again, like you said, Brittany, I think, I'm not sure if she's stepping into herself or if we're just seeing a little bit of what her true self is when she's not overburdened by grief.
I think that those are all very important points, and I think something else that I thought of, that as you're saying that, you guys are jogging little scenes in my head as we watch this. So I know we've discussed that I have memories in movies, and you guys have very different things than I do.
Yes.
I see things in words, and I see the whole thing, and now it just did the thing where it clicked in my head and I went, oh shit. So what happened was, as you were talking about that, I'm realizing that all that is true, but there's also a point where she deliberately decides that what she is doing is what her dad would have done, and she is just telling the story, because the thing she loved most about her dad is the way he would tell the stories. To make even a boring ass trip up to Milwaukee, and the car trips anywhere that they took, she loved the way he would tell stories. And she at one point decides she is telling a story of this to keep that family happy until she can bow out.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, and
she's
also
providing that entertainment. So she is reanimating her dad's memory by embodying the way he would have told a story, and she's channeling that.
And she's a storyteller too. When, like I said, the reason why there's the misunderstanding that she's the fiance is because she's built this whole elaborate world within her head that she is in a relationship with this guy who she just sees get on the L. I almost said the train. She sees get on the L every day. And also, I would say too, kind of building on what you guys are saying, is because her mom died when she was so young, her dad has told her this super romantic story about the relationship her whole life. So she never actually saw the true ups and downs and appropriate.
Brittany's on it.
Or the appropriate mundaneness of being in a relationship.
Right.
Where there's big moments of love and romance, and there's also just the day-to-day shit. And so she's only had this big, huge romantic story. And so also I wonder how much it impacted what she thinks romance will look like. And if it's not this story, then it's nothing. And so really kind of boxing herself in and then living inside of her head so fully.
And looking for that romantic story to be hers, for the thing that defines a relationship would be the big romantic gesture. And yeah, that's a great point. I didn't even consider that. And when you started going that direction, I'm like, oh, good job. And and definitely like when you're talking about the marriage thing, I'm like, you're leaving out the part where you think about smothering them with a pillow. Like the real shit of the marriage where you're sitting there like, if they don't stop snoring, I swear to Christ, they are not going to wake up in the morning.
Or like this person.
And no one is going to know what happened.
Or like this person has seen me have diarrhea. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
It's not all this like fairy princess stuff. There's also the down and dirty shit.
Right. This person has cleaned my poop pants.
Yeah, exactly.
And so she it's that thing where when someone passes away, they always stay this perfect thing in glass. You know,
they can.
Yeah, they can.
It doesn't always happen.
Yeah, but they can live in that story. And her dad definitely, per what she says in the movie, painted that story. And so, like, what high standards to consider romance? And that in itself can keep you in a box.
And also that with it being about her parents, how special that feels and how much she would want to have that for herself.
Yeah.
But not know how to get it. Like, not know how they got there because she only hears once they're together. It only hears about that part of the story. The other thing I was thinking about is, as we were discussing this, is that throughout the entire movie, right, we've been talking about how she really struggles to be assertive. She really struggles to kind of take her, I mean, for lack of a better way, actually, it's taking a role in the family. It's kind of what she's struggling to do, which makes a lot of sense. And then at the end of the movie, she is the one with the agency that makes a change in what the outcome is.
Mm-hmm. Character development.
She is the one who is giving the speech at the wedding.
Yes. It's not Jack or Peter or even Sal kind of finally saying, I can't let this go on.
Right, which she like deferred to him because he kept telling her he was going to do it. And because of her trust, Hannah just...
That motherfucker.
If you all haven't seen Hannah's death stare, you are missing out because it is epic.
Really good at it.
Yeah, but anyway, like you see her like defer to the men to make the right decision or for them to do the thing, the father figures to step up and do the right thing and save her, like the boss to tell her what to do.
Or Jack to finally say, I'm in love with you. Don't do it.
Yeah.
Right. But I think that one falls like third tier.
Yeah.
Like the first is like her boss like is telling her what to do and she's looking to him because he's clearly the adopted father figure.
Yeah.
She has a really like close relationship with him. And like she's following his advice of like, well, you can't tell him now because, you know, she'll die and you can't have that because, you know, appendix might burst. And then she's going, oh my God, I can't do that to this family. And all I have to do is lie and then disappear.
Yeah.
But we see her continually defer to the men and like hope that, is it Sal? Is that his name? Saul, right. Saul. Hoping that he will finally come through and do the thing he keeps telling her he's going to do instead of being on his own agenda with her life. Not cool. Not cool,
Saul. Also, because I think that in some ways, he knows that the family, it sounds like Peter has really detached from the family and kind of just has like a, what is the word?
Estranged?
Kind of estranged, but I was thinking more of an acquaintance. An acquaintance affiliation with his family versus having a close family attachment.
Well, right, because he's at like... He's in the Marina Tower.
Yeah, I know.
Like I moved somebody out of there once, and it looks like that. It's the Marina Towers are right on Lake Michigan, right by Navy Pier. They're a very unique building. They're the I don't even know what kind of shape to describe. They're kind of a weird triangle shape building, like a curvy triangular shape.
Yeah.
But like those are like extraordinarily huge and expensive apartments, and this guy is like, got a 3.71 at Northwestern, and he's a big shot and a big deal, and his family is people who make their living at estate sales, which is a very blue collar kind of job, even though they're obviously buying stuff from rich people who die.
Yeah.
They have a very blue collar feel to them.
So unfortunately, Saul is another person taking advantage of Lucy and using her as an end to a means.
Right. Which was a refreshing turn to see that instead of continuing relying on the men and the men finally being the ones that drive the plot, that she's the one that drives the plot. And right when, can I object? And taking the power back, I thought that was a good thing to see, that she did find the assertiveness finally, and that is the turning point of the movie, as opposed to Prince Charming riding in on a white horse and saving her and letting her be, all passive and, just, yes, this is what I've always wanted. And everyone checking with her, and then her just basically following the plan again.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That was not the way this movie ended, and I thought that was good.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so one thing I thought would be interesting to touch upon briefly is the concept, because I think a big plot point, at least in the beginning of the movie, is that she has developed this whole internal relationship with a stranger. The Peter Gallagher character, also called Peter, in the movie. And a term that I've seen more and more on social media is the term maladaptive daydreaming. And so I'm not sure how widespread this concept is yet. But I wanted we could briefly touch upon it, because I think one thing, if I was watching this as a layperson, not us basically, or not in the field, I would be like, what's up with this?
A non-professional individual?
Yeah. I'd be like, what's up with this girl who's so, is she delusional? I think that's the term you use, Hannah, when we're watching it.
No, I said she's not delusional.
Oh, she's not delusional.
I said she's not delusional.
She's not. She's very grounded.
Yes.
And maladaptive daydreaming is not it's a quote unquote psychiatric condition, but it's not a diagnosis in the DSM, but it is a term. I think it's pretty new. When I was researching it before this episode, all the articles are 2016 and later. So my assumption is it's a newer term.
Yeah, it must be, because in academia, 4 years is nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's the idea that, I don't think she quite fits, but it is the idea that you are so internal in your head, daydreaming, that it gets in the way of your functioning. So I think the argument for it could be that she isn't living a social life outside of her head that we can see. Instead of trying to build romantic relationships in the quote unquote real world, she's instead getting very invested in a daydream about this character. And from me looking up maladaptive daydreaming, a lot of it is you have to have a pretty elaborate world, multiple people, a whole setting, it's creating Narnia kind of inside your head, and then choosing to live in Narnia instead of go to work or do your schoolwork or anything like that. And so I don't think she meets the requirements for maladaptive daydreaming. And I think she does live so much in her head that if I was working with her, I would be a little worried about how elaborate the story is that she's created about Peter. But it hasn't, I don't think, delved into she's not functioning. And
it hasn't delved into full break with reality. It's just fantasizing, exactly. Which, if we were to use the clinical term for what she is doing, she is dissociating.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a trauma response.
Mm-hmm. And when I was looking at one of the studies for maladaptive daydreaming, they do say it's associated with dissociative disorders.
And Hannah's about to go ham, so here we go.
What did you say?
Well,
Damn it, Hannah!
I'm sorry.
I just set you up.
I know.
I passed the ball.
You're yelling at our listener.
Yeah,
I'm away from the mic. I'm watching my levels, and if I'm loud, I'm not sorry. One of my clients tell me she thought I was quiet when she first met me. I was like, "Ha, you should talk to my wife about that one."
Yeah, you're not quiet.
No. No, I'm a rock singer. This is quiet is not my MO, but I'm probably a quiet therapist. But the ball is passed. Hannah, dunk on it. Do it.
So sometimes when we're experiencing, when we're in survival mode, sometimes one of the versions of that is being dissociated, which is where we're disconnected from the reality around us in order to be okay. It's a way to protect ourselves. It's a way to not have to be in pain in a lot of different ways. And so I think that my guess is, especially knowing as someone who has been a caregiver for a loved one who has died, there's a lot of time where you're sitting around and you're trying really hard not to think about what's happening in front of you. So it makes a lot of sense that she would come up with something like this, that her time at the seat when she's at work, when she doesn't have to be with her dad, that's time where she doesn't have to think about what's happening to her dad. And so that also gives her a chance of, like, she sees a handsome guy, she starts creating this story, which again, I think is really normal and natural, and also works as a distraction for the time that she's with her dad. My guess is that that's part of what helps her get through that experience. But also, it's a part of it's being disconnected from what's happening in order to be okay, because it's so intense.
Right, because dissociation is basically a circuit breaker, right? Like, we dissociate, it's part of the flight response. Yeah. Biologic is part of the flight response, and it's a circuit breaker. So when everything gets too intense or you've been feeling too much for too long, you just check out. Mm-hmm. And that can involve maladaptive daydreaming, like Brittany was talking about. But it's a function of dissociation, which tends to exist when people are overloaded, which most commonly comes from intense anxiety or trauma. Mm-hmm. And we know that she has likely encountered both. And also when you are bored out of your mind.
That's what I was going to say. And then you continue to work a job that is so probably insufferably boring.
Well, and like,
and she,
rude.
And she explains
Chicagoans are not known to be polite. I mean, you know, I know New Yorkers are worse. It's probably because they have worse pizza. But
oh my God.
If they were eating the fat and happy version of pizza that we have, they wouldn't be so angry.
And I would also say,
but even she describes her job as, and I sit, and what does she say? I go to work, I sit in the cube like a veal. Like she knows that it's something that's not stimulating in any way.
No. And here's the thing that happens when you do a job like that and you've been through some really bad stuff, is that when you are that bored and disengaged, is that you have essentially two options. You either stay and you sit and whatever pain has not been processed or memories that keep coming up as your brain tries to process them, which is what's happening when you have what's called intrusive thoughts, is it's your brain trying to do what it's supposed to do, having a normal reaction to an abnormal situation that overloaded the system so much that it can't process it. So basically you realize that you have two choices. I can either sit in this shit that feels so scary and like a black hole that if I let it in, it's going to pull me down and I'm going to be stuck in this. Or I can think about this maladaptive daydream here and fantasize about what my life might be like if I'm with the handsome rich man here, and what our life might be like if it becomes something story-worthy like my parents' life. And might drop.
And then I think, too, what is a sign that she understands that it's just like a daydream she's been having and entertaining herself with, is that when she gets these opportunities to become part of this family, like, she's not just going with it, like, initially. Like, she could very easily have been like, oh, here's my chance to fully, like, play a role and be deceptive, and she could have easily been like, oh, yes, I am the fiance, and really lived in that and, like, ate it up. And she does get more involved with the family, but she's constantly trying to either get herself out of it or assess how she can. So she's not just fully immersing herself in a way that she would if she was like, ooh, like she knows that this isn't what she should be doing.
And I feel like, and at the same time, someone in her situation, going through what she went through, to have a full, complete identity handed to her would also be really hard to walk away from in some ways too. So, like, I feel just like as an example of someone else who might be in this position after experiencing what she experienced, it also might in some ways feel comfortable to step into something that's already full and complete, and all she has to do is be herself. Which shifts us very neatly into our next topic, which is attachment and family systems. And so one thing we've kind of been referencing to, but haven't really fully talked about, is the family that takes her in, which is Peter's and Jack's family. They are a very loud, boisterous, overbearing family who are very involved with each other. And really, they like talk over each other. They're like a classic example of like a big family and how they behave. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And kind of like we referenced earlier in the episode, when you come from if you're like an only child and then an only child of a single parent, and like you don't need to, there's probably so much quiet in your house growing up, and you have space to talk, you're not fighting for attention or anything. Going into that family system where the style is, you just jump in, you butt in, you assert yourself. That's so uncomfortable coming from the background Lucy came from.
Very uncomfortable. Very much uncomfortable.
And we all are like looking at each other, waiting to see who wants to go next.
Sorry, I'll go next while we're doing that, just because I realize I need to issue a Chicago retraction before I lose my Chicago card. I'm pretty sure I said Marina Towers earlier, and I meant Lake Point Tower. So I'm gonna.
I was wondering what in the fuck you were talking about. I was like, I think it's called. I didn't know the name though.
It's Lake Point Tower. So I'm gonna issue the Marina Towers are the weird corn cobs, and those are also expensive as fuck by House of Blues. Across the Lake Point Tower is where he was, and those are ungodly expensive.
And it's the only building the east side of the river that was allowed to be made. You learn that on the architecture tour.
Correct.
Which I highly recommend if you
because
when you're allowed to visit Chicago again.
Glorious. I've gone it more than one time. Okay, anyway, sorry.
In Streeterville, which was, we could. Let's not even get into Chicago
we don't need to
history.
talk about it.
I'm sorry. Built on garbage, now it's a city.
Yeah.
I did it. I'm sorry. I love my city. Duh Bears.
Who wants to go? Because they're a family that is up each other's business. Like, they really are in each other's business.
They are. They are, and they're very firmly attached to each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very affectionate. Like, you see the younger teenage daughter sitting next to her mom at the hospital, like with her arm around her, like very affectionate. And I think, and what I was thinking about as we were talking about this before we started recording, I was starting to think about how so often when we marry into a family, we're marrying into a different family system. And that if we came from a system that was a lot different, which in this situation would absolutely be the case, right? Lucy grew up with her father as her main primary caregiver, and it doesn't appear as though there were cousins or aunts or really anything else. Like, it seemed like they were pretty, just the two of them for the most part. So coming into a family where you have to kind of make room for yourself, it would be a very awkward transition to try to figure out, how to do that, which also can bring up clashes in communication with her and Peter. Because this is a lot of what I do work with couples on, which is where when you come from a family where a certain type of communication has been modeled, and you step into another family system where it's not the same, or it's completely different for all different kinds of reasons, it can feel really uncomfortable and make you feel very unsure of like what to do, and be frustrated, and also not really sure how to take your role in that family. And that is the piece that I feel like when we talk about how different it is to come together when we get married, that communication piece is one of the biggest pieces that I feel like I work with couples in terms of what was the communication like in your family, and what role did you play too, also of course plays a role in it, but what was the communication like in your family, and how do we need to shift the way that we talk to each other or have expectations for each other in terms of how we talk to each other, and also how we interact with each other's families, because it also would be the opposite, where Peter would have, if her dad was alive, I guess. Peter might have shit. Peter might have a hard time with the kind of singular quiet experience of her, of Lucy and her dad. So again, also just trying to just think about what it was like if you're married, think about what it was like the first time you met the family and how different it was. Now, my family is enormous. And most of the people who have been married are married to somebody who has a pretty small family. So a lot of times you can kind of tell, like, people are overwhelmed with how kind of loud and we talk over each other. It's kind of similar to this idea and vibe of, you have to talk loud in order to be heard.
I felt with this system.
Yeah. So like partners that I were married to had a hard time sometimes kind of coming into that setting. And also because a lot of times we go back to the role that we are in the family. So like I'm an oldest sister. So I kind of go back and playing the older sister role, and that complicates how I connect to my partner. So there's a lot of different things happening in terms of the transition to making your own family with you and your partner, and then going back into the family system and out of it. And sometimes that's part of the transition that's really hard to manage for people.
And I would also imagine, too, when it comes to like setting up your own household, how you conduct yourselves in that household. Like people who like a lot of quiet space versus people who are like, no, our household should be boisterous, and how that could cause conflict. Not just we're in the households of our other families, but like creating our own too, I wonder. It makes me think of like the idea of love languages as well, which I think people are somewhat familiar with.
If you're not, go to 5lovelanguages.com, educate yourself.
Yeah, and it's just the idea that we have a natural assumption that people are like us, and then we can judge them based on that assumption. So with like Lucy, maybe that family, Jack's family, would be very like, why is she so quiet? What's wrong with her? When really she's acting how she perceives as like normal.
Yep.
And
catering
vice versa.
to others'
Yeah.
needs, placing someone who is identified as sick, especially placing their needs first, paramount to anything and everything else. It makes perfect sense.
And I would also wonder too, Lucy would probably struggle with, I would imagine, within Jack's and Peter's family, like decisions involve the whole family, or other people's opinions get involved more. And I bet with Lucy, because she just grew up with her dad, all of her decisions are kind of like, well, I've decided to do this. And so I'm sure that can cause a lot of conflict as well. As like when we decide to make a decision, Jack, why do we have to ask your mom? Or why have you been thinking about how your family feels about it? I don't think she would necessarily be like that because she's so empathetic, and that's kind of her role. But I could see that happening in different situation.
Yeah, totally. You can totally see all of those things. I think looking at people's family of origin and how they behaved is such a tremendously important factor in understanding how they're going to perceive normal and what normal is going to look like to them. Like, my wife will never listen to this because she didn't like the movie, but and me talking is probably her least favorite component, at least top three. I think the top three least favorite things that my wife has for me is breathing, putzing, and talking in no specific order. It rotates pretend the day. So, but when like I interact with her, like I come from a family of three large, loud, obnoxious boys, and she comes from only child. And understanding what is normal, what you have to negotiate with, how you get attention, like, is so different between the two of us. Like, seeing her and her mom interact, like, almost symbiotically, versus, like, when I need attention and, like, I will come into the room and be like, look at me! Pay attention, I need reinforcement now, please, thank you, hello, this is the things that I've done. And it takes that to get that attention, is you have to then demand said attention. And when you're in a system where you don't have to do that and you don't know how to do that, being around people who can make you very uncomfortable, and it can be weird.
And I think I would like to make a caveat that both Hannah, Ben, well, all three of us, Hannah, Ben, and I, are all from big families. And so I know a big feedback we've gotten about this podcast, especially in the beginning, is that we talk over each other, we interrupt each other. Some people also have gotten a weird vibe that we're like competitive with each other, which is not true. No. And I think that's because we all come from big families where this is the natural way you exchange ideas, is kind of talking over each other, and we don't ever feel upset with each other about it.
No.
And we had to really get that input from listeners and then work on slowing down, taking breaths, right. Letting other people, it's okay if there's dead space, like letting other person jump in, because like that's our style from how we were all raised.
Right. And now building on that, it's my idea will be forgotten if I don't say it immediately.
Yes.
And the family will run it over. But also with me and Brittany, I'm just going to out us here, is that if you haven't figured it out already, things between me and Brittany, even though Brittany's going to death stare me here, is that we have ADD.
Oh, how dare. I have not been diagnosed.
Yes, you have, by two professionals sitting in this room with you right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, and what I was going to say instead, Ben, is that we also all have anxiety. So we also, I think, very much are in that vibe of like, because I feel that like that too. Like, oh shoot, like I don't want to forget this. I don't want to forget this thought. But also, we all want to make sure that there isn't any weird space in like any awkward silences. So I feel like the other part of that is that we're all trying to be very aware of that. So I feel like it's just a combination of, and also that we really friggin' like each other. And so, and it's really, and this is fun. Like, it's fun to do this. So anyway, that's kind of
but we're emulating.
A side note.
Yeah, we're emulating families, and so it's either one of two things. Like two of us have anxiety, two of us are ADHD. So like it'll rotate on which particular dyad you're getting at the moment. But if Brittany or I don't say our thought right away, the likelihood is that we're going to forget it, and then it's going to be lost because in our family it would have been lost. Yes. And then not only do we not get to say it, but then we forgot the important thing that we thought we were going to say that ties into the purpose of this podcast, which is not competitive at all with anyone except our own internal clock of, if I don't say this in the next 10 seconds, I'm going to have 97,000 other thoughts, and it's gone forever.
But I do think it's a good. But I do think in talking about this, I never really thought about before how we're all from big families. So it's no wonder that that's something we've had to be mindful of and learn to undo. Yeah, doing this podcast, that is just such a normal instinct to just jump in. And I could definitely see if someone was listening to us and weren't from that same family system, it would feel so abrasive. And aggressive, maybe.
Yeah.
And rude.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, we just go like, I did, I'm excited now.
Yeah, exactly.
Look at Kitty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like even though we've kind of already established that part of the reason why Lucy might not be as assertive is because she doesn't have the experience, but also because she is really compassionate. I mean, like, and just really compassionate and wants to make sure that the grandma is okay, and then she's going to bow out after that happens. So I also feel like, besides the fact that she doesn't have the skill possibly to assert herself in the family in general, she also doesn't, I would imagine in some ways also doesn't want to become too prominent of a figure so that she can walk away when she needs to. So I feel like it's kind of like a balance of those things for her.
You're right, because she doesn't really try to become like a shining star in the family. She still tries to take a pretty passive side role.
Yep, she's trying
involved.
to get out. She's looking for her out the whole time.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is a family system in which they are, like we said, they're so connected to each other that they can't help but sort of like wrap around her like a big huge hug and take her in. They're probably the kind of family that, which is what I was raised with too, where every friend became part of the family.
Yeah.
And maybe you even stayed with them for long periods of time. I mean, Uncle Sal was just a Jewish neighbor they adopted and made a godfather, even though he's not even Catholic.
Right.
Saul, yeah.
Saul, yep. It's so easy to think of Sal because the son, like, you just feel like he had such a thick, like, Italian New York accent. John Jr.? Joe Jr. Yeah. Like, I'm listening to that, and I'm like, that's not Chicago Italian, man. That is 100% not Chicago Italian.
Yeah, he's New Yorking it hard.
Yep.
Yeah, he is.
But yeah, as we're talking about this, like, let's touch on attachment a little bit, because I feel like we could run miles around this, but I think we got it covered pretty well here. Is that in the attachment styles, there are 4 main ones, but there's definitely more, and getting into attachment is a thing that has been discussed and researched ad nauseum since 1910.
Sure.
Maybe before. And there's a ton of material out there on it. If you're interested in attachment theory, it's fascinating. But I'm going to kind of like go through the 4 main ones, but there's definitely, more like 8. But you get secure, which tend to be confident, reciprocal, non-reactive, and show resilience, which is what we see this family be. Is we see a strong system of secure attachments to each other, which means that even though they may have to compete for attention, they're not dealing with constant chaos or serious drama or problems in which their needs may be forgotten. They just may have to reach out and be noisier to get their, lower level needs met and to fit in.
I would even say with Peter, who seems to have chosen to estrange himself a bit from the family, when they go to visit him in the hospital, it's not like, oh, Peter's such a dick, or they're never besmirching Peter.
No.
They're still very loving and warm towards him, even though they might have cause to be upset with him.
Right, which they do, but even still, it's very loving, disapproval. It's not like, oh, well, we're shunning Peter. It's like, oh, well, Peter's kind of a dick, but we love him anyway because he's a dick.
He's a putz.
Right.
Yeah, he's a fucking putz. He sure the fuck is.
Right, but then you look at some of the other attachment styles you'll see is dismissive avoidant, which you see people who struggle with isolation, ambiguity, ambivalent, and emotionally distant, which I wondered... Is that her? I don't think so. I think you see some of it, but then you see fearful avoidant where there's internal conflict, dramatic, things have been unpredictable, and there's ambivalence towards their needs and existence. This we don't really see in this movie.
No.
But it's something to understand that when a person has a fearful avoidant attachment style, it usually means they've had a chaotic parent. A chaotic caregiver. And none of the characters that we see in this movie have that.
No.
Yeah.
None of them have that. So we don't see that. What I would argue we see is anxious preoccupied, where there's an emotional hunger, there's a need for, there's a fantasy bond, there can be a lack of nurturing and turbulence. So what I think happened is that what's her main character's name? What's her name?
Lucy.
Lucy, thank you.
Lucy.
Right.
Hey, Luce. Hey, Luce. A classic Chicago accent.
Yeah. Hey, Luce. It's that's definitely Chicago there to no hard C's and Lucy. Yeah, no, come on. Yeah, but that's the name I say all day. My colleague who works across the hall from me, her name is Lucy, so I say this name all day, every day. But anyway, we see, I think that we would argue, I see a mix of the dismissive, avoidant, and anxious, preoccupied. Mostly the anxious, preoccupied, because she probably had an attachment style switch, which can happen upon the loss of her father, because she, as we described earlier, had a loss of her foundational identity and anchor point. Because I think she probably had a very secure, confident style when her dad was alive, and she knew exactly who she was and what she was doing. And then when he got sick, her world got shattered. And then when she lost him, her whole attachment point and style probably changed due to the encounter of the trauma. And we see her working her way back to a more secure attachment style where she is comfortable and confident in herself, not worrying about what's the right way to respond or how can I get my needs met. And that you see when someone has a sick parent, where the needs of the parent become greater than the needs of the child or other part of the system, is that one person's needs become the focal point to the point that other people aren't sure if their needs are important enough to get met, so they don't reach out and instead struggle internally with, can I reach out? If I reach out, will my needs get met? If I reach out, will they be enough? And while some of the things we talk about, we see her being kind of like distant and avoidant and aloof and alone, I think more so the anxious would describe her, because what we see her is constantly worrying about the grandma the whole time. It's not even worried about Peter, who, she saved from a train, is in a very confident move. But we see her so preoccupied with making sure that grandma's needs aren't met, and these people who she doesn't even met don't go through the loss she did and replay her trauma again, and it be her fault that this happened this time, which is going to be unacceptable to her, that, she switches into this anxious style, and then it amplifies until she kind of brings herself back to finding herself again and becoming more of that secure, attached person, has an anchor again.
Yeah, because at the end of the movie, we see that she's quit her job.
Yep.
It's her last day.
That's her last day.
Which means she stepped into that. And even in the middle of when she's giving the speech at the hospital, she says she checks in with grandma. She's like, Grandma, are you okay? Like, you still feeling okay? And then she keeps going with her story. Like, even when she has her moment, she is still worried about that.
Yep.
And I think what is cool about that, which I think says more about like her internal thing, is she doesn't know that she's going to be with Jack when she quits her job. Like, she is trying to reform her identity outside of that attachment too.
Yep.
Absolutely.
She's returning to having the resilience. And that's such a critical component of secure attachment. And you can see it right away in people when they have a secure attachment, is that they don't fear constant failure, and they don't fear that if they do something wrong, they will be abandoned.
Yeah.
Because I think she's just been muted, you know? Because what I'm thinking about it too now is, like, she's not a mousy person. She doesn't seem like a scared person. Like, she's very assertive. Like, she's somewhat assertive with, like, Joe Jr. and stuff like that. Like, she isn't like, like meek. She's not meek.
No, she calls her boss right on his shit.
Yeah, she calls her boss out. She asserts herself to her landlord.
And the hot dog guy.
Yeah, like, she isn't... Yeah, she's just kind of going through it.
She is. I am happy, though, that they did not put a ounce of ketchup or even mention the word ketchup in any scenes with hot dogs.
Yeah.
Because ketchup does not belong on a Chicago hot dog. I will accept the argument on other hot dogs if you want to be wrong, but on a Chicago hot dog, it's not a discussion.
Okie dokie.
This is my home. You two have adopted it. Do I have to do... Don't make me do the... Don't make me do the Bain
I'm not
speech.
taking anything from you.
Make me do the Bain speech.
I'm not taking anything from you, Benjamin. Jeez Louise. So, do we want to shift to our final topic?
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is grief and the holidays. Which actually, I didn't think of this till now, is probably a pretty pertinent thing for us to discuss. This is a very different holiday season than in the past.
Oh, just got heavy.
Didn't mean to, but also this might be helpful for people, is that, you know, this is the year that a lot of people aren't going to be celebrating their holidays how they typically would. Speaking personally, like, I'm not going home to see my family for the holidays.
Nope.
Hannah and I are going to be spending the holidays together, two single gals.
Yep.
Get into the holiday spirit.
Yep.
And so this is going to be a holiday season in which a lot of people do feel that grief.
Yeah, absolutely. They're going to feel a lot of it. And a lot of people, how many Americans? 225,000?
Ish, yeah.
That have died as of right now when we're recording this. 225,000.
Yeah.
4 full NFL stadiums. Like big ones, like the Dallas one. It's absurd. Right? That's a lot of people.
So it's going to be a lot of people that are actively grieving in the holidays, and a lot of people who are, you know, making the decision to not travel, which is a wise decision. And so therefore having possibly very lonely holidays, or holidays that aren't what they're used to in the past.
Yeah, so what I was actually talking to clients about this today, is also the grief and the loss of traditions.
Yes.
Of things that normally happen.
Yes.
Things that you normally do, and how it's fucking hard, you guys. This is fucking hard right now. And it's okay that it feels like shit, and it's okay that it feels sad, because it is fucking sad, and that's okay. And I really have been talking to people about really trying to lean into the idea that this year is just an exception, and that this is temporary, and that while I'm not going to promise that the holidays next year are going to be all of a sudden magically completely better, that hopefully we'll at least be able to spend time with people that we haven't been able to see for, I mean, I haven't seen my family in probably like 13 months or something, because I didn't go home
before.
Because I think actually probably was last Christmas, actually, maybe was the last time. So just realizing that it's hard for everyone, and that if you feel sad, that is okay. This has been a really hard year, and trying to step into doing whatever the fuck you need to do to feel okay, no matter what that is.
Right. I think, like, just following that up, which is beautifully stated with compassion that makes Hannah a great therapist, is that, you know, like this, we're all struggling right now We are all comfort eating. We are all wearing pajamas because our normal pants don't fit. We are all creating adjusted patterns of sleep, sleeping more, feeling sad, feeling hard, needing to engage with the dissociative processes that exist in our brain as a circuit breaker from terribleness. Like, it is all part of what is going on for all of us this year, and it's okay to take care of yourself. Like, please, for yourself, think about this story with Lucy here, and when she became the most okay is when she decided to stop factoring in everybody else's shit and do what she needs to do for her. And in a world right now where facts are somehow contestable, and alternative facts is a word that fucking exists, like, you know, it is
emotional truth.
Right, emotional truth. Whatever the fuck nonsense is being said on Parler, like, just all Parler exists. Any of this stuff, like, it's a lot, and it's heavy, and it's hard, and we all need time to check out, to sleep, to have the cookie, to go on the run if that's your thing. But whatever it is, like, please take the time to take care of yourself and allow yourself to deal with the grief that not only comes from if you've lost somebody in your life, but also that comes from all of the traditions, all of the comfort, all of the day-to-day attachment that, you know, things will be okay. We have all lost that. We have all lost that. We have lost the daily knowledge that I'm going to wake up tomorrow and it's going to be a relatively normal day.
Yeah, and I think in this movie, they're obviously not going through a pandemic. But what they do point out in this movie is that this is the first, I think, holiday season that Lucy doesn't have her dad.
Yeah.
And so, so she's kind of more like, you know, she doesn't really have, like, you like saying, lost her tradition she probably had with her dad even up till the end.
Right.
And so it makes sense that then she could be easily swept up in a family that seems to be very rooted in tradition, if I had to guess.
Right. Oh, you know what? The Christmas tree. The Christmas tree.
What do you mean?
She would have never had to bring that tree up to her apartment by herself, which
probably
is why
the first time she's had one in her own apartment, she probably was at her dad's house.
She may have had, but she had one because she talked about having like a fur would have been lighter or whatever.
Well, she might be familiar with trees, like, because she's had them at her dad's.
True. I mean, any of these are possible, but my thought here is that if she had a tree in her apartment, who would be helping her carry it up?
True. Yeah.
Other than Joe Jr.
Oh,
yeah,
God.
clearly.
He couldn't carry anything.
I don't think so either.
He can carry a shirt that's too small, that's for sure.
It's carrying him. And so I can see, I know the one point in the movie where I was like, okay, now she's kind of taking it a step too far. Is when she takes the taxi and she goes to their house for the holidays. And I remember very thinking like, well, see, she didn't have to do this. She could have ghosted them.
Yeah.
And then it got super involved. And I think what we need to acknowledge, and like you were saying, Ben, a year when a lot of people might be doing things differently, is when you are grieving, you are more likely to do, for lack of a better term, weird stuff.
Yep.
Like go to a family's get together that you have no business going to, that you could easily excuse yourself from.
Yes.
You could just nope out of.
And then and then sleeping on their couch for the night.
Right.
Because you're just in it. You're so in it emotionally that you can do things that are quote unquote irrational. Yeah. Because you're trying to get a need met. And when we're grieving, we're just weird. We're weird. We're unpredictable. Mm-hmm. We can do stuff we would never do before and then be like, what the frick after we do it? And so sometimes we have to have, like you're saying, grace and compassion with any unpredictability and things that are out of character that might come up.
Right. And have that with people in your family, as if you have to make a hard decision for yourself to stay away from them. Have the compassion for them, too, that if they act weird because of what you said to them that you can't do, remember that it is taking something from them, and it's a loss, and that any irrational behavior may be due to that. Mm-hmm. And people's not accepting reality that, like, this shit is real, and, like, it's not equivocal, it's real, is also really kind of a function of that.
Yeah.
Is that they're dissociating out into what was the word we used? An unhelpful daydream?
Maladaptive.
A maladaptive daydream.
Yeah.
I can think of a few states like North Dakota and South Dakota and Iowa that seem to have been living in one of those.
Yeah, that's and
I think another thing with grief in the holidays is too, and this is what a downer. We're really taking it down in this part.
We'll bring it up with final thoughts.
Is that
That's
people,
what she said.
Is that people?
Oh God.
Is that people will? There is a higher percentage of self-harm and suicidal ideation and suicide attempts during the holiday season because of isolation, because of loneliness, because of those things. And so even though she is kind of taking advantage of this family, who's also a little bit taking advantage of her, it probably is a wise choice for Lucy to immerse herself in a family system at a time when she would be more vulnerable, as most people are.
Yeah, absolutely. And that part of experiencing grief also is that there could be special things that you did with those people. It could be special memories that you hold around the holiday season, because sometimes we see loved ones that maybe normally we don't get to see as often. And so there's a lot of different thoughts and feelings that come up. No matter how long the person that you loved that was in your life has been gone, the holidays are hard because there's somebody who isn't there. And so it's also in some ways a reminder of the people that we've lost. And so I think that's part of what, and all of the media that we see, where like everybody's in some happy family where there's like 10 people around. It's like, that's
worse. Fucking Hallmark. Fuck you, Hallmark.
Yeah. That was aggressive. That is not everyone's experience. So also, just like grief in the holidays will be something that we could always talk about.
Yes.
Not just because 2020 is
trash.
I don't even know what to say.
Dumpster fire.
Yeah.
An exception.
Yes. And so just letting people know that, like, even if next year is hard or whatever it might be, just knowing that it's really normal and natural to have feelings of grief and sadness come up more around the holidays, because there's special times that we usually spend with family and friends.
That's such an important thing, and to communicate. And I hope everybody hears Hannah say that, because it's so, and Brittany, it's so important to factor in that the holidays aren't happy for everyone.
Yes.
People have bad memories with the holidays. Mm-hmm. People might need to do the holiday different, and they, don't want to be reminded of all of the happy and joy and hear all of the songs and see all of the happy white people in Hallmark Channel things. I'm looking at you, Hallmark.
Yeah.
Get some diversity. But the things that we want to see are that need to be factored in is that those things for other people are reminders of what they don't have. Mm-hmm. And it's hard for them. And, people might need some space or to adjust to things differently, or to have a moment in time where they're sitting in their office listening to brutal Norwegian death metal instead of, all I want for Christmas is you for the 47,000th time that day. It's really important for people to remember that it's not all happy. Mm-hmm. And this pressure that exists sociologically from the music, from the colors, from the decorations, from everything to be a happy time, that's not always the case. And it's okay that it's not.
Yeah, and it makes me wonder if how much comfort people might get from this movie, which I've never thought of before, who might be in a similar situation to Lucy, where they are by themselves.
For the first time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And even when she had her dad, it was just her and her dad. It wasn't these big moments like we're referencing.
Right.
And so even when she did have her dad, a situation like Jack and Peter's family was still so different than her experience. Mm-hmm. And being wrapped up in the holidays.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I see it. This is something that since I've been a supervisor, I have made damn sure with all of my staff is that, when we have supervision meetings every time of year in late November or maybe sometimes even mid-November and certainly in December, there's a time I sit down, check on your clients, bring this up. They may be feeling bad and not even want to bring it up to you because of transference issues, like where they don't want to get it. Like it's so pervasive that they may not want to upset their therapist with it. Like their thoughts about the holiday because they don't want to neg on anybody's holidays like we see Lucy do in this movie. Like those same types of decisions your clients might be making for you because they care about you and there's a relationship there, even though it really needs to be more one way. It's, as much as it can be. But the things that therapists need to keep in mind is that this is hard for your clients. And I try to make sure I drill that, especially to newer clinicians, that, hey, might be your first time sitting with people in this, and you need to be prepared to help them through that and draw attention to it and bring it up about what are the holidays like for you, because suicides do increase, alcohol increases, domestic violence increases, all sorts of stuff can happen that nobody sings songs about. At least,
yeah. I think that exactly what you're saying is like one thing to take away from it as a clinician is approach the holidays with a sense of neutrality with your clients and let them define what that means. Right. Let them take that in whatever direction, because it can be even if you have a good relationship with your therapist, it can be intimidating, or you can be like indoctrinated to if someone comes at you with like, oh, the holidays are coming up. What are you doing? To just have a flat response. Like, fine, whatever. I don't know. I'm figuring it out, and just move on. Right. The same way when people go, how are you doing? You say, I'm fine, even when you're not. Right. Because, we have like stock answers for things.
Right. Especially here in the good old Midwest USA, where, when people ask you how you're doing, it's a greeting. And when I was in the Netherlands, it came out of my mouth. I was studying abroad in the Netherlands and went like, hey, how are you doing? How's it going? And they're like, they answered me, but like...
That's a personal question?
With this weird look, like, yeah, like...
I don't know you.
Why?
You can do what I do. When people say, how are you doing? I go, I'm all right. And then I just keep walking. And they can do with that what they will.
So helpful social skills.
Now that Brittany's aggressive ambivalence has brought us back.
No, I'm honest to a fault. Yeah.
That's my favorite. Well, you tolerate me, so I'll take it. Let's move this from the dark, hard parts of this to back to the final thoughts and
treatment. We go off of a whiteboard that I put her outline on, and I put final thoughts first before treatment. So you caught that, and I just caught it as it happened.
Oops.
Yeah. So I guess with treatment. I think you kind of touched upon it, Hannah, a bit. I don't know if you want to take this away with the movie ends, happy ending. Her and Jack get married after knowing each other for
2 weeks.
2 weeks, maybe 3.
Right, with the just married thing on the L train, which bullshit, that would happen.
Yeah. And
or that you would want it to happen.
Yeah, and
I ain't going out that door for any reason.
No fucking way.
The emergency door.
Wedding dress would get so dirty,
We get fucking ripped to shreds.
Smelly.
Anyway,
God, Chicago looks so different from 1994 to now.
Yeah, but I would imagine there'd be a lot of more bumps in the road with that relationship than Wink. But I guess if I was going to work individually, I think it would just be with Lucy. I think we've talked a lot at length about like existential therapy, logotherapy, that kind of stuff. I think with her, it'll just be a lot of like identity work. Who are you? What do you want? Kind of what she's already doing with quitting her job. Like, I think I could see her going to therapy because she's floundering and she doesn't know what to do next, but she knows she's not happy where she is.
Yeah.
Like if we were going to see a Lucy that maybe Jack never proposed.
Yeah.
Like the movie just goes on. I think what I'd want to do with her is a lot of empowerment work, really identifying like what makes her feel good, trying to see if she knows what that is for her if we strip everyone else away. What do you like? What do you like to do? Bare bone stuff. Like I've worked with people who, when they really look at their own selves in a vacuum, they don't even necessarily know what food they like. or a music they like. Like, they've so much defined themselves by other people. And I would imagine a lot of Lucy's identity, and not necessarily in a bad way, is probably tied up with what she shares with her dad. Like a sense of adventure, a sense of wanting to travel, that kind of thing. And so I'd almost want to pull back to, like, where, like, maybe even regress with her to, like, what was the Lucy that went away to college? Let's reconnect to who that was. Mm-hmm. And that's when you made a choice for yourself and your dad was alive. You made that choice for yourself. And maybe go into process through that with her. And then reconnect that with her current goals. Because also she is a bit of Arrested Development. Like, how much of her is still the Lucy that tried to go off to college, that got stuck?
When you look at her apartment, a whole lot.
What do you mean by that?
The decoration,
You did too, girl. I was like, Brittany, we didn't even see her apartment that much. What are you even talking about?
That's what I mean. Like, what do you mean by that?
I mean, like, the style of decoration seems a little bit immature. Her, like, trying to bring a tree up on a pulley system is all
that was not
sorts
thoughtful.
of nonsense. I lived in an apartment very similar to that.
You had to be like me and drag it through the entire basement of multiple flights of stairs,
right,
and then try to sweep up pine needles all the way through.
Right. I mean, that building is very similar. When we lived like down the street from each other, like very similar to that area.
Yeah.
Those courtyard apartments are pretty common here. But like seeing like the way she has her stuff set up, and it looks like not too dissimilar from what you might expect a college apartment to look like.
And she dresses pretty. I mean, it's hard to discern how much of this is just 90s style and how much of it is like a personal statement about who she is. Like, she dresses very just like big drabby clothing.
That was the 90s.
Which, like I said, it could have been the 90s. And blouses and sweaters everywhere.
But also, my guess is those sweaters were her dad's.
Oh damn.
And
sorry, guys.
Boom goes the dynamite.
Sorry.
So I think
Hannah sunk the ship.
So I think it would be a lot of like just trying to help her figure out who she really is, and help her and empower her to just like, sometimes with certain clients, your only role is to kind of cheerlead them.
Yes.
Like she makes a decision for herself. You're totally right. Like, validation, cheerleading, empower.
Yep.
And that's all you really do.
Yep.
It's just kind of back them up and walk beside them, and like just help and be like a sounding board for them, and like just encourage them. I think I'd also could see her being a client who would be very much like, was this the right thing to do? Like, wanting me to tell her what to do. And sometimes your role then as a therapist is to just repeat that question back, kind of volley it back. Like, well, what do you want to be doing? I think a big misunderstanding about therapists is that we're supposed to give people advice. And a common saying amongst therapists is a bad therapist gives advice.
Very much so. And your statement there just backs up my argument for anxious preoccupied, because if she's so anxious about like wanting to get the right answer from you about whether she's doing the right thing, that would be a clear indicator of anxious preoccupied attachment style. Yeah. Because she's seeking the approval for you and can't get into her own needs unless she's got your approval first. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then your job can sometimes be like, let's sit in the discomfort of me not telling you the answer.
Yep.
Let's sit in the discomfort of you telling me what you want, regardless of what I think. Maybe I'll be mad. We got to sit in the discomfort of that uncertainty and build up the resilience of that. Which
is absolutely the right call.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And God, clients that have that style hate that.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah,
God,
it's palpable.
Hate it.
And I think what you have to clock for yourself as a therapist is wanting to save them from that and be mindful that you're going to keep that step backwards, and that's okay.
Yep. And I think that, since Brittany is now a supervisor too, which is long overdue in my opinion, is
Agreed.
that the early on in your therapy career, you will make that mistake.
Oh, yeah.
You will make that mistake. You will rescue people from that, when really that is when you need to use silence, as we call it, but like sit back and let silence be a tool and let them sit in that and realize it's not as bad as they thought it was going to be. But man, do they hate it. But that's palpable. The work. It's palpable. You like feel that like, why don't you just tell me what to do or tell me what the right thing is? What's the answer? Like, nope. I don't know.
So if you're annoyed with your therapist, or maybe you've even left a therapist because you think they're supposed to do that for you, they're doing the right thing by letting you sit in it and not giving you an answer.
They sure are. It sucks, though. Even though when we've been in therapy ourselves, I have that going like,
Yeah. So that's kind of my thoughts about what I would do.
I think you're just so dead on there, and I hope that you're teaching people exactly that way because you're so dead on.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, it's my turn, I guess. You guys are both looking at me. Okay.
Yes, Hannah, that is why you are a 1/3 part of this podcast,
yes, I know,
because we would like to hear your voice and thoughts.
I don't know. I'm kind of trying to think about what the struggles that Jack, and in the world where, they know each other for 2 weeks and they get married and go on vacation together, which would also be super interesting, just in terms of communication and traveling, and how all the different pieces of going on a trip together can make communication very tricky. It seems like they have a pretty good rapport. Clearly, they are infatuated with each other. So there's still going to be kind of like that bloom on their relationship. And at the same time, there also might be some unexpected grief that she is having because she's doing these things without her dad. Or she's doing these things and she can't tell her dad about it. So I think it would also be really trying to help Jack understand that some of the experiences, like him maybe wanting to have like a fun, exciting adventure that I think she would very much wants to, that it might be hard for her to do that. And really trying to help him understand the space that he needs to give her, and also giving space for himself, understanding that a lot of the times when we struggle with communication or struggle with identifying our feelings or talking to somebody about how we're feeling or what we need, it can sometimes feel intentional from a partner, as if they're saying something or being quiet to get under your skin or to punish you in some way. And almost always, it has way more to do with what's going on inside of their head for themselves, and a lot less about intentionally doing something to the partner. And sometimes, and it can feel intentional when someone pulls away or bursts into tears unexpectedly, or any of the things that might happen when we're still processing grief. So I feel like one of the things that I would want to check in with them about, besides definitely teaching them the communication skill, the couples dialogue, which we've talked about in several different episodes, is essentially a skill to help couples talk to each other without being escalated, because we don't get anywhere when we're fucking screaming at each other. Huge surprise, I'm sure, to everybody, that you're not going to solve a fucking thing if you're screaming in each other's faces.
Right, because guess what, folks? Parts of your brain needed to process that type of information are offline.
Yes.
When you are being perceived as a threat by your partner, the parts of your brain that connect to them and can process logic are offline, which is why every argument goes from, you hurt my feelings, you did this, to fuck you, well, fuck you, well, fuck you, and blah, 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 not even words.
Yep, exactly. So I think I would want to help them, manage their communication with each other, but then also checking in about how she is feeling about her grief, checking with Jack about what that's like, because both of his parents are alive, and he might have experienced a significant loss, and he might not have. And sometimes having a partner who hasn't experienced a significant loss like she has, it can be hard for them to understand the way that it kind of lingers in the back of your mind when you're doing different things. Like, this is a life that I now have and I'm taking steps forward in. That's a life without my dad. And how that thought can be hanging around, not forever, but that it can be there, especially making a huge transition of now being married. And all of the different things that go along with her father not being able to walk her down the aisle. Like, there's so many different pieces here that I really feel like a part of me really feels like she wouldn't have been able to do it.
Well, and also the fantasy that she's had in her head her whole life about what a relationship and a marriage looks like. That's going to be rough, maybe.
And also why she balked at the wedding in the chapel wearing like some shitty dress from Deb.
With a coat over it?
Right. When she once she walked into there, like all of that shattered.
Yeah.
Because she remember we started at the beginning with her walking past that big grand church she spent so much time hearing about her parents. Yeah, no.
Yeah. I just feel like it would be surprising if she didn't also balk at or not show up to the wedding or something.
Yeah,
because
right.
I think at the same time, something else that we talk to people about when they're experiencing grief is making huge changes in the first year sometimes can be kind of what we're talking about how you can just be acting weird and not feeling yourself and trying to fit on a shoe that doesn't fit anymore. That sometimes we also make big, huge, drastic changes, hoping that either we'll be able to walk away or put the grief away in a different way. And you can't walk away from grief. That's not how this works.
Nope.
And so also knowing that that's a pretty big, huge fucking change that she's made within the first year of losing her dad. So also just knowing that those complications could come up as well. So I think it would be a lot of communication skills, talking about the differences in their family. That's part of what I do with couples every day in terms of growing towards each other instead of away from each other. And I would work on communication, and I would also check in about the grief and help. And some of it might really be helping Jack understand what this grief might be like for her, because it might be hard for him to imagine.
Yep. And the thing that I wanted to tie into that as a thought, because I'm totally with you on all that, but you want to bet $1,000 she got married in that church?
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
I agree.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. She replayed that whole thing. So all of the things that she fantasized about what a wedding would be like in that church, all the things you're saying, that would probably be a lot of emotional baggage to contend with when dealing with your own stuff, and that stuff starts coming up when it's, nothing goes right on a wedding day. Nothing.
Yeah.
And
I guess also taking into consideration that we don't know how long they actually went between when they got engaged and when they got married. It really could be a year later or something.
Or 3, yeah.
Or, the next week, which is what it feels like.
It's the 90s rom-com. You know when it was.
Yeah.
Yes. Although there wasn't snow anymore, so...
That is a fair point.
Could be. But, yeah, I'm with you, though. I think that all those things you brought up are great points.
Thanks.
So I guess that leaves me, huh? So... with her case, I think wanting to create a dialogue where talking about grief openly and working through that attachment style issue that Brittany brought up is a really important thing here. I think making sure for her that there's a space where she can talk about the difficult parts of her life since her dad got sick in a way that doesn't induce shame. Because some of the things that I've learned about in recent trainings, I've been studying attachment trauma recently because I felt like psychodynamic was an area of work that I needed to study more. And in that, one of the things that I learned about that I did not know, and it makes so much sense, about shame being a biological deactivator for arousal systems in the brain, which can apply to any of the arousal systems, meaning that if you feel ashamed about feeling a certain way that is not congruent with the way you think you should be feeling about something like, say, the loss of a parent, where you have some anger about that, or anger about the way their personality changed when they were sick, and the things that you gave up, and you have feelings about that, the shame may come in and block you from feeling what you need to feel about that to fully encode and process the memory so that you can understand it and let it go. And that can keep you stuck for a long time. That people don't have anybody who's ever sat with them and let them express the shitty parts of grief, the parts where they're angry, the parts where they're remembering the bad parts about their parents' life, the things that their parent did that were shitty, the disappointments, instead of the romanticized version like she was told her whole life by her dad. I think that she would need a therapist to be able to help call her attention to the fact that grief hits. It's like a rainbow. You can't look at a rainbow and see red. You can't look at a rainbow and see blue. You see all of it. And when you're processing grief, you have to help a client get to the point where they see all of it instead of shaming themselves for feeling parts of it that feel undesirable. And I think for her, we'd really need to do that. Create a space where she can have that space. I don't know that it would be all of that direction, but oftentimes when people lose someone, they romanticize that person's existence, and then they don't let themselves feel the anger, and the shame comes in and shuts it all down. But the problem is the way our emotional processing works is you need to feel the feeling so that your body can store and encode the information and no longer hold on to the emotional activation anymore, because it has served its purpose of properly coloring the image of the emotion so that you go, okay, that was a blue, that was a sad one, that was a red, that was an angry one. So you know what files to put it in and store it away. And without that, the brain keeps trying to come up with a way to encode the information so that it can let it go. But it won't let it go until it's been encoded. So you have to feel the feelings. Because the thing that I try to draw people's attention to is how many times have you been successful at negotiating with yourself when you're being mad? When you've been mad? Like, stop being mad. Does that work?
No.
No. Not for anybody. How many times have you been successful? Like, I'd like to stop being sad now.
The amount of times that I say to client, so does that work?
Ooh.
About many different things.
Right.
And they're like, I'm like, because I feel like telling yourself that doesn't change the feeling, doesn't help you process the feeling, and you're invalidating yourself.
Right, which the world will do for you plenty. You don't need to add to that.
Yeah.
Especially if you're a young, single, pretty woman like we see Lucy here. The world's going to do plenty of that for you. And yeah, I think just like learning to understand, especially like the role of shame in blocking processing, because it blocks you from feeling what you need to feel. Because what keeps you from going out and punching everybody in the face that makes you angry? Shame. The shame of what might happen if I do that deactivates you. Why do you not sleep with everyone you find attractive? Other than doesn't work that way, is what keeps you from hitting on them and trying to approach it that way? Shame. Did you just say the virus? Yes, the virus. The virus. Hannah is putting a hood over her face in shame right now because she realized what just happened.
Yep.
But anyway, the process of shame exists biologically to deactivate that, and like you have to sometimes in grief and trauma work to override the block processing because of shame. So that's the direction I would go with her.
Cool beans.
Love it.
I'll have you go first for final thoughts, Ben.
Yes, that's probably a good idea. So this movie is not my jam. It's not. It's just not
in the practical magic vein, which is also not your jam.
Right. So I mean, it's the same. Like I was watching it,
Sandra Bullock denier.
I am not a Sandra Bullock denier. Let's watch Speed. We can watch Speed. We can watch Gravity.
To a masculine storyline, I see that we're just fine with Sandra Bullock.
No. We can watch Gravity. Gravity is not a masculine story. That's a rebirth story.
It's a boring story.
That's not.
We're not talking about Gravity.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Agreed.
Or Bird Box. But anyway, she had another one, a weird one, Premonition or something in the early 2000s. You want to watch a trippy as balls movie where she's awesome?
I love a classic Sandra.
This is not classic Sandra. This was weird fucking movie you pick up at the Family Video when you are bored, and then you go like, "What the fuck did I just watch?" Like it's in the same category as like The Machinist, like that kind of group of movies.
Oh wow, okay.
It was good, but weird. Anyway, this movie is just not my jam. Like I think it is well written and well acted for what it is. Like I like the actors in it. I like the characters. I love Peter Boyle, and anytime I see him in things, it makes me happy because he's so funny. Even just in a like no word role like Young Frankenstein. The man was so funny, and he and the grandma made a boring ass show about Raymond blowing the milkman. Like, interesting. Like, God, I hated that show, but he was hilarious anytime they were on the stage or the screen. But this movie just doesn't do it for me. It's not my style. It's not something I would voluntarily watch ever. It's fine for what it is. It's probably at the top of its genre for the 95 range of like bad rom-coms. Like, this is probably a good rom-com for the age, but you know, like, as I'm watching it, I'm just sitting there and waiting for Bill Pullman to step up and make the best presidential speech in the world.
Yes.
And like thinking to myself, wow, why is it that President Whitmore is a better president than we have right now? He's a fictional fucking character. But I would love that. Or, you know, I have to, like, I look at Bill Pullman and then I think about Lone Star and think about him going, barf! Those are the things that come to my mind when I wonder, when I'm like, I don't like this movie. Which is, my wife decided she was passing out because I was hate texting of Hannah and Brittany going, why am I watching this? This movie is 2 for 2 in the hate category in my house. But I appreciate it for what it is. I appreciate seeing Chicago like it is represented properly and seeing that, you know, it was a well-acted movie with a cute story, but just, I don't know. Whatever. Not my jam.
Okay. Thanks, Ben. I freaking love this movie. I think I know all of the dialogue, actually.
She was reciting it out loud as we were watching it together.
Yes. So, I mean, I only did it for like 2 minutes. But I love this movie. I think it's one of the movies that I think I was 13 when this movie came out. And I think I saw it at the movie theater, actually. And I remember loving it. I love Sandra Bullock in this movie. I friggin' love Bill Pullman. I love Bill Pullman. I love him to death. It's a whole thing. Anyway, I don't want to talk about it anymore. But
I want to talk about it.
I just have always really liked the story, even though it's a little wacky and it's an old rom-com. Like, I love how everybody looks like a normal person. Like Bill Pullman isn't ripped to shreds, and Joe Jr. certainly is not ripped to shreds. And that, you know, women don't have, like, Sandra Bullock looked very much like her
hair looked regular.
Her hair looked regular. Like, she's still a beautiful woman. Like, there's no doubt about that. But again, just how different this movie feels based on just some of those things compared to the stuff that we're watching now, where it's like full glam all the time. So I think
like
that's
hair blown out, like
yeah, exactly.
Style always curled perfectly. Like,
yes.
I'll give you that.
Just a little bit of makeup, but always like it's actually like a lot of makeup all the time.
Right.
Perfectly
done.
Yes. So I love this movie. I always watch it around this time, and yeah, it made me happy. I'm glad that we watched it. I don't know what else to say. I will watch it a billion more times.
Yeah. I also love this movie. I own it on DVD. And yeah, I think I was like 9 when it came out, and I think I really like a lot of when you're younger and your mind's still pretty simple. I like Sandra Bullock. She had brown hair. I have brown hair.
Yes.
She wanted to travel in this movie. I always wanted to travel. The very romantic part of this movie I really resonated with me at a young age. So this is a movie I've probably seen on TBS and TNT 1,000 times before I owned it. I love this movie. I love a 90s rom-com. Hannah and I watched You've Got Mail and Harry Met Sally together last weekend on our own volition. And like, I think exactly what, you know, Hannah, you referenced to, it is startling to see how, like, quote unquote normal everyone looks. It really makes you realize how, like, glammed up and stylized everything is now, even when people are supposed to be quote unquote regulars. Everyone in this movie looks like a good looking regular person. Right. Mm-hmm. And I think this movie is charming. It is a classic 90s mix up. And I'll watch it a bajillion more times as well. So let us know what you think of this movie. If this is a favorite of yours or if this is something that's not really quite your jam, you can contact us at popcornpsychology@gmail.com. You can also find us on Instagram and Facebook at Popcorn Psychology, Twitter at popcorn_psych. Like Ben was saying, you feel free to review us on any of the platforms you frequent for podcasts. We see your reviews. We share them with each other. They mean a lot to us, and they also are the best way for other people to find us. And so we wish you happy holidays, and do whatever you got to do to make this holiday meaningful for you and comforting for you.